we go. So I will start by saying, here we go again. I'm so excited. Episode
I,
number 2.
I love it. We're going to talk about it. We're going to talk about it.
Let's talk about it. Let's talk about it.
Yes.
So I was sharing how I'm still high from the retreat that I attended, Women on the Grow. What number was this?
Well, I've been doing retreats since the 80s, but this was the ninth time at that particular location in Malibu. I've done them in Palm Springs. I've done them in uh, on cruise ships. I've done them in hotels in the LA area. But we found this hidden jewel in Malibu. And so you were at the ninth time that we facilitated a retreat there. I'm so glad you were able to attend.
I'm so glad that you invited me. I'm so glad I went, and I will be going forevermore because the bond that was created was indescribable, and the
Yeah,
rituals that we did was
yeah.
just soul opening, and I'm still processing it. You know,
Mm, I know. It's almost like a hangover, but it's a good hangover because you're still processing it. And guess what? Next year, we're adding another day. Because I
oh,
didn't get to do everything that I wanted to share. I let it flow because we had so many new faces. So I'm excited how we are moving and grooving with this idea of healing and recovering and networking and detoxing and laughing and praying and dancing. We did it all.
yes, we did. Yes, we did. And one of the things that really stuck with me was how you were connecting us to our lineage, remembering the ancestors, doing some of the rituals that I've been learning about in the last 5 years as I'm, going back to my roots and understanding who
Mhm.
we are as African descendants in America and what the healing looks like. And so I noticed that you deliberately and smoothly interjected some of these practices in our traditional faiths, of the Americas, which is Christianity. And I was really impressed with that, the folding in that you did. And so I wanted to speak to that also to say thank you and ask you about what your intentions, you speak on that a little bit.
Well, I love the idea of separating the generations. Now that I'm a seasoned woman, I'm on one side of the aisle, and then I have on the other side of the aisle the what we call the youngins. And so we did that, and it was a brief opportunity, but I think they got the gist of it. Why it's so important that we give the youngins an opportunity to say we honor you, elders, and to give them an opportunity to ask us questions because we didn't have that opportunity. And so it was so cool the way it just came about naturally. And you could tell there was such a hunger and an excitement and gratitude that they were able to ask the hard questions and they were able to hear, I don't want to say an answer, but they were able to receive a response that was what I call real and raw. We're not sugarcoating it. We're not going to tell you it's going to be easy. We're not going to tell you just snap your fingers and say a prayer, quote a scripture, and it's all done. No, baby. You're going to have to learn how to endure. And then I did what I call honoring the ancestors. I got that initiation by traveling for uh, 12 to 13 years with the African American women on tour, which was steeped into the African culture with the drummers and the music and the rites of passage for the young girls, the speakers that were there, the clothing that we wore, how we honored each other. It was an amazing experience for me, and I departed from it for a while because it was such an abrupt ending, and then I went back to my normal way of living and worshiping and dealing with life. And there was something always missing. I was something missing. And so I love the idea of libations. I learned about it there. I learned about rites of passage. I learned how important it was to remember our ancestors, to read the books, to own our story and yet be accountable for healing and to represent true sisterhood. So, honoring our ancestors is something that I do. I have pictures all over my house of my ancestors. And I think a lot of people, in a more traditional sense, get hung up on the word ancestor as if it invokes something evil. And if you're talking about characters in the Bible, that's an ancestor. You're looking to them for wisdom and guidance. And so I understand that our history um, tragically reminds us that traditions and rituals were taken from us. They were denied from us. You couldn't come together as a community. You couldn't sing songs. You couldn't vote. You couldn't own property. You couldn't have funerals. You couldn't, you couldn't own property. There was just so many. You couldn't have a business. And so I think that as in honoring our what we did at the retreat was honoring our mothers was so important because we as women come from a mother. And often what I'm finding is that we got these mother wounds. I had my own mother wound, not as deep as some of those that I counsel. And Melinda, I've been so surprised by the number of counseling sessions that I do. I'm thinking, oh, I'm gonna be counseling people on, how to write a book, how to start their business, how to, overcome depression. And a lot of it is women that were hurt by their mothers,
Mm,
where there's estrangement, where there is hurt, where there is secrets, and the lack of healing, a lack of understanding. And
mm,
so, as I healed my mother wound, I began to realize that I need to understand the history, the sacrifices that they made, the things they had to endure. And why would I not honor the very vessel that brought me here? Why would I not take the time to understand what hurt she went through, the secrets I'll never know that cause mothers to show up the way they show up? And
mm,
then to realize as a mother, and now I'm a grandmother, how hard it is to be a woman,
mm,
how hard it is to be a mother and a grandfather. Said, wait, a grandmother. I'm like, wait a minute. If I'm struggling and I got a wash machine and dryer, and I have two cars, and I've got air conditioning, and I've, can go to the grocery store, and I'm saying life is difficult, maybe I need to understand what my ancestors endured and understand their spirit of resiliency. What can I learn from that? And so when I speak their names, it's a form of healing. It's a way of waving and saying, I see you, I remember you, and I forgive you for the perception that I had. I honor your resilience. I honor your long suffering. I honor your creativity and your innovation as a woman, the
mhm,
inventions that you made, the way you stretched a dollar, the way you raised your children. I mean, when I hear of mothers that had 12 and 20 kids and 18 kids. I'm like, my God, how did they do that?
right.
You know? Yeah.
Right.
And, so, and I think about how during the pandemic, Melinda, there were so many people that I know that could not go to the funeral of their loved ones. And they
Ah,
were stressed out because
yes.
they missed the opportunity of collective grieving, of memorializing, of telling stories. And so we've got to reach back and remember how important it is to celebrate those shoulders that we stand upon, to speak their name, to forgive them, to love them. And what I found is that as I'm counseling women, either they're not repeating the good qualities because they're not remembering. And in the act of calling out names, there's something that stirs up in your generational memory that says, oh, wait a minute. For me, oh, yeah, I mentioned at the retreat. Yeah, my mother taught me how to sew. No
Mhm,
wonder I don't buy expensive clothing. I had that revelation at the retreat. And so when you remember, sometimes it's painful to remember because there are a lot of wounds where mothers were not there, or mothers were mentally ill, or mothers were young. They were birthing babies at 12 and 13 and 14. Uh, they don't want to remember the poverty. They don't want to remember the coldness, the harshness, because that mother was tired. That mother was working two or three jobs. That mother had addictions. That mother had transactional relationships just to keep a roof over her head.
mm.
And, and yeah, did I say that? That's something
Yes, that
so
hit.
real. Okay.
Mm,
And so what we do is we want to bury the pain, and in burying the pain, we're burying the memory of that mother, that
mhm,
grandmother. that auntie, and you're not speaking her name because of the pain that's connected. And that's what I find in this Western culture. We don't like pain. We don't
Right.
like discomfort.
Give me a
We
pill
don't
for that,
give me
please. Give
feel.
me, distract
I don't
me,
want to
please.
get distracted because I don't want to deal with it,
Mhm.
numb me. I don't want to deal with it. So I think that as I witnessed us honoring the answers at the retreat, I could feel the awkwardness. I could feel the hesitation. I could see the tears. And
Mm.
so many of them surprised me that I know personally, that I know that this was something new for them when they said to me, Jewel, thank you.
Mm.
They whispered to me, I knew that I was doing the right thing. I
Mm.
knew because these women were experiencing something new and they had this gentle uh, initiation into what we used to do. And it's
Mm.
like, oh, wait a minute. Yeah, I'm supposed to remember mama, even though I didn't understand mama. Yes, I need to thank that auntie or that grandmother that had to raise me because mama had to work 2 or 3 jobs or mama died at a young age. It's so important that we honor them because, Melinda, the more I think about my mother in law, my mother, my aunties, and started to know their stories. I didn't really know their stories until I became an adult and until I
Mm.
became a mother. I'm like, oh my God, no wonder she never smiled. Oh, no wonder she was drinking. Oh, no wonder she was divorced. Oh, no wonder she stayed in that marriage so long. It created an empathy in me
Mhm.
because now I'm seeing how difficult it is to be a mother, a wife, a grandmother, to do it um, with excellence, to do it without sacrificing my own identity and self care. It's a hard thing to do,
Right.
and so with my tribe, Melinda, there's so many women that see me as a mother figure, and at
Mm.
first I'm like, mother, you got a mother, or mother, I'm still thinking young thoughts, but it's like, Jewel, you are over 70. Yeah, and you got experience and you got wisdom and you got stories to tell. And these women need to hear it because they're living in a time of instant gratification. And they're living in a time where society says that we are graded on 3 things: our
Mm.
performance, how we get paid, and are we pretty?
Mm-hmm. And that's success, huh? Or
Yeah.
that's
So,
value.
so yeah. So your performance on the job. Are you a good mother? Are you a good wife? Well, you must have did something wrong for the relationship to go south. Oh, your performance in the bedroom, your performance on the job, your performance. How good your house is kept, and
Mhm.
then you're graded on. Well, how much are you making? That wasn't a standard before. It was it was your kindness. It was your commitment to community. It was your service. It was your hospitality. It was your um, raising children. It was honoring God. It was rituals. I grew up back east where we had porches.
Mhm.
And porches to me is symbolic of community and village. We don't have porches anymore.
Mhm.
We have email and text. We don't have porches where, my mother worked all her life. And I can remember going to certain my friends' homes, and I walk into a house and say, "Oh, your mother's so nice. Your mother's so sweet. Your mother's funny." Well, I never saw my mother laugh, so I'm like, I want to go over to that house. Oh, they have tacos every Friday. Oh, look at that family dynamic. Not knowing that they were putting on a mask too, but I
Mm.
would see different dynamics that I didn't know. I thought that the way our household was, that's normal. And I think we all think that until we're introduced to other mother figures and other father figures and other family dynamics. And you realize, oh, there is something missing. Oh, there is something I'm yearning. I don't know what it is, but now that I see it, why didn't I get that? And so
Mm.
we either become resentful
Mhm.
or we realize that we need other elders in our lives to help shape us.
Yes.
Because as women, we have to deal with these issues. First of all, we're dealing with romance and the soulmate and who's going to love me and who's going to this and that and how am I going to retire and we're going to have this picket fence and we're going to do this. But nobody talks about the division of labor. Nobody talks about cognitive labor that we as women have to deal with, doctor's appointments and homework and house cleaning and parenting and hormones and all these things. And it's like it usually lands on us to do that. And my mother passed away from breast cancer right after I had my children. I'm like, what am I supposed to do with these babies? I didn't know what I was doing.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know what I was doing. I just shot from the hip. And
Mm,
I look back in hindsight, Melinda, and I'm like, you know what? I know there's some things I could have done better. And I had to go through my time of forgiving myself for what I didn't know
mm, mm,
because I still don't have a godmother. I didn't have, my grandmothers died at a young age. So,
mm,
and I'm the oldest of three sisters. So I've always been seen as the oldest, the go to person when I
mhm,
didn't have a go to person. I
mm,
didn't have a go to person. So I think that translates into how I facilitate my retreats and my coaching is that I want to give to women what I didn't have.
mhm, mm,
You know,
mm.
and so by default, I'm becoming an auntie and a mother to women who like they're in their 40s, 50s, and 60s, still talking about that wound from the mother,
And
the grand.
yeah, and I wanted to ask you also about that. That's a beautiful point you bring up. And what came to mind when you were talking about the intentional process that you bring us through, both ancestral and then also what you've gathered, your tools of wisdom that you gathered growing and learning. Um, some people get stuck. They get stuck with that wound, right? And so I saw the opportunity for some releasing and emotional maturity to allow
Yes.
us to step deeper into each level of our womanhood. Um,
Hmm.
I don't know if that's the word. And that used to come in the form of initiations back in the day. And
Right.
I felt like you offered us initiations of sorts in 2023 version. Um, so did you also see that during our time during the retreat? And then also I was going to ask you on another question behind that is how do you help people go through the process of forgiveness to be able to see the gifts of our mothers, and then how does that help us connect the generations together, and then eventually our culture?
Well, it is a process, and I'm very much what you would call a holistic type of a spiritual teacher. I recognize that the reason when we disconnect from our mothers emotionally or physically because of death or distance or hurt, we lose a guidepost. We all need a guidepost at different passages of our lives. I needed a guidepost in raising my children. I needed a guidepost with my marriage, and I didn't have it. I needed a guidepost. Oh, I'm starting a business. Well, women in my family didn't have businesses. So
Mm,
I needed a guidepost. I needed a guidepost when I had my hysterectomy and my hormones changed. I needed a guidepost. How do you mourn losing your son? I didn't know how to do that. I
mm,
needed a guidepost when I'm losing my mother and my father. I needed a guidepost in understanding that my parents divorced when I was 7 years old. I never, what's the word? I never had a language to get in touch with my emotions. I
mhm,
just suppressed it. You manage it and you think it doesn't bother you until you get into a community of other women that are wounded. Like, wait a minute, you too? And then you realize I never healed. We think because we don't talk about it, we're healed.
right.
We think because we can still get up and smile and do our thing, that we're healed. No, you're not healed, baby. And
Mm,
so it is in the collective gathering that I facilitate. And I thank God. I thank the answers. I thank the divine, whatever this is in me, for giving me a special gift of empathy and a sense of how important ceremonies are.
mhm,
Because in the Western culture, we have ceremonies. Oh, there's a new president. There's going to be an inauguration. People
mhm,
go to church and they have communion when on the first Sunday.
mhm,
You have birthday parties. We have funerals. We have graduation from college. And now we've got these, dare I say, these rituals, which I think are really gotten out of control of the proms, which are really kind of, I don't have much to say about that, because I came from a time where it was totally different how we celebrated the prom and celebrated graduation. Now to me, it's all about, again, the pretty. It's all about, performance. Not It's not about your grades. It's not about the fact that you're going. It's a passage of life. It's a rites of passage, and
Mhm.
so those things have been distorted in my mind. And so what I'm finding is that the women that I'm working with the woman and the child in her.
Yes. Yes.
You know what I'm saying? And
Yes,
so
I
I had to work with the child in me that, like, you know what? I haven't had a mommy since the 80s. I didn't know how to mourn the loss. I was in charge of the funeral. I was in charge of do this, do that. So you're so busy doing the work that you never do the work. You're so busy maintaining the family, keeping the job, getting the kids through school. How do you manage the relationship? How do you manage the in-laws? How do you manage the economy? How do you
Mhm.
keep your health intact? And so it's a lot. And
Yes.
having a village of other women at our retreats and my experiences, I love the diversity. You've got widows, you got divorce, you got married, you got single, you got women that have never had a loving relationship. You've
Mhm.
got women that have been married 2 or 3 times. You've got women that are bitter. You've
Mhm.
got women that have really done the work and they're healed in their self-esteem and their self-worth, and their voice is there now. That, okay, I get it now. I'm not going to point fingers anymore. I'm not going to, as you said earlier, Melinda, people get stuck in their victimhood. You don't know what they did. You don't know. And even we get stuck in our victimhood by the colonizers. We get stuck in that.
Mm.
Yes, we were, oh my God, dehumanized. Yes, so much was taken from us, but I don't want to get stuck in it. I want to remember it so I can move forward. I want to salute the ones that endured things I don't think I could ever endure, but I better remember it. I better acknowledge it, but don't get stuck in it so I can
Mhm.
move forward in the reality that I'm living now. Because in my reality, I have other demons to fight, other giants to fight:
Mhm.
technology, AI, uh, politics, uh, the environment, what's happening to our foods. I'm so concerned about my grandson and children that are coming up dealing with gun violence and shootings and food
Mm.
that is terrible. It has no nutrition. Children that are staring at screens, and where my grandson goes to school, the teacher says, "Oh, they have gym on Wednesdays," as if that's something to celebrate. We had gym every day.
Right.
They need to be outdoors.
Yes.
They
Yeah.
need to be outdoors. So we have different battlegrounds now than my mother did. Uh, we have different fights, so that we've got to get healthy. We've got to communicate. We've got to help each other up when they fall down, not shame them. You see, um, what I have found with the dogma in church is that we're taught a lot of commandments, which don't do this and don't do this and don't do this, but we're
Mhm.
not taught how to do things. My mother
Mm.
told me what not to do, but she didn't tell me what to do.
Right.
There's a big difference.
Right.
A
Right.
big difference. Don't do this and don't do that. And so what I'm finding, that I want to be a resource in our faith community of giving women way power, not just willpower. We need way. What is the correct way to recover from uh, your addiction, or to recover from your parents getting a divorce, or to recover from that rape, or to recover from poverty, or to recover from racism? How do you do that? What is the way, as I did, go from having a job to now being an entrepreneur? How do you do that?
Mhm.
And I thought that's what most of my coaching would be. But as I said, it's more about emotional and mental healing.
It makes sense because unless we deal with that, nothing else can really prosper in the intention that I believe the creator had us to be. Because, you mentioned during the retreat, and I've always felt this way, that you chose your parents before you came onto this earth. So we chose that, that relationship that some of us may be mourning and feeling the victim of. For us, and my belief is to go through it, heal from it, and then use our gift that we gain from that to heal others on this planet. and
Yeah.
to move the consciousness of the culture forward, because we're always growing as a culture and community.
Mhm.
So I could see why people would come to you, maybe under the guise of, oh, I want to, like when I met you, I was like, oh, I want to run my business and be just like her.
Yeah,
When you start talking about what that looks like, for me to be able to show up, I got to look at these insecurities and these
that's right.
victimizations, you know? Uh,
Exactly. Where am I stuck? Where am I procrastinating? Where am I blaming? Where am I where's my shame? You know,
mm,
I had to Melinda, I had to forgive myself over and over and over again for the things I didn't know as a wife, for the things I didn't know as a mother. I grew up with more women in my family than men. So here I'm raising two sons.
right.
I'm like, I don't know what to do, but boys, they're different.
Mm-hmm.
And so, um, not only so the more you forgive yourself, you're able to forgive your ancestors. Or some say people say, well, let me forgive my ancestors. And now that I've forgiven them, now I can forgive myself. So it can work both ways. But I think that is the importance of acknowledging the mothers, the aunties, the grandmothers, the grandfathers, the uncles that were there, that you could be here today, and to say, Lord, just give me some type of insight as to and empathy to what they endured so that I am not complaining, so that I can adopt their sense of resilience, to remember that I am the prayer. I am
Mm,
the realization of somebody's prayer. Just as I pray over my Cody, I mean, when that boy is here, I'm staring at him, I'm praying over him, I pray over my son, because, if everything is the way I would like it to be, my son will outlive me.
mm,
And I want to believe that his future, he'll be able to endure and excel in his future because of the example from his father and I, that he'll be able to endure the tough times, because I'm not sugarcoating.
right.
Life is difficult, son. And now we're telling Cody that too. Oh, grandma, I lost the game. These son, it's okay. You're gonna lose a lot of things. You're gonna get beat a lot of times. And it's not that I'm being negative, but
Mm,
it's that if you could give them that hard wiring at a young age, that you're not gonna always win. You're not
right.
gonna always be well liked. You're not gonna always be accepted. But if you're taught subconsciously by society that you are graded on how much you're paid, your
Mm,
performance, and are you pretty? Are you attractive? Or do you have the look? Then you're going to be aiming for the wrong things in life.